Paranormal experiences don't really work to a timescale, and therefore we invite you to listen to a Dark Minisode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Dark Minisode. It's that time of the week where we like to give people a little taster of the sort of experiences that we receive. And obviously, it's kind of like a starter portion before the main course on Friday's Dark Paranormal. But in addition, and arguably more importantly, having these minisodes allow more of your experiences to be heard by our listenership. Because less than 10% of the experiences we receive are long enough for a standalone episode of the Dark Paranormal. But as I always say, and I genuinely mean it, this is your show. It cannot exist without you. So therefore, if you've taken the time to write down and send in your personal experience, it's only right I find it an audience. And dependent on its size, it ends up in one of three places. Either on our Dark Bites Patreon-only show, where we go through a number of stories and experiences over the course of a half hour each week, or featured as an episode on the Dark Paranormal itself, or read out right here on a Dark Minisode on the main feed. And there are two things we promise to our Patreon team, and that is they will never hear a repeated experience. So if we cover an experience in Dark Bites, it will never find a place here on a minisode, and vice versa. And the other promise we make to our Patreons is they receive this episode on a Monday midday, as opposed to a Wednesday, because that's one of the perks of being a Patreon. And if you'd enjoy being a Patreon and you're a fan of the show, head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal, where, as well as supporting this independent show, you will also receive all of our main feed episodes, both early and ad-free, and of course can gain access to our Patreon-only podcast, Dark Bites. So for roughly a cup of coffee a month, you can get full access to the entire back catalogue of Dark Bites, which currently stands around 60 hours worth of Patreon-only content. And believe me, I could talk for hours about just how genuine a community we've built, but this is a minisode and we need to crack on. So crack on we will with our experience today from our listener, Kimberley. And Kimberley writes, "Hi Kevin, my name is Kimberley, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I've been listening to your show for a few months now. I listen every day on the way to work, and sometimes at night whilst I do schoolwork. It's become my perfect paranormal fix, so thank you for what you do. I've been inspired to share some of my own personal paranormal experiences. Feel free to use my real name, but I will change the names of the others involved for privacy purposes. I've been sensitive to spirits for as long as I can remember. The extent of my ability is entirely up to he, she, or it. I've heard whispers. I've seen full-on apparitions. But for all intents and purposes, I shall be sharing the darker experiences with you. My first experience begins in 2011. My parents had gotten back together for what was the third time. I'll give some background. I grew up in a chaotic, abusive home. I believe that's what attracted a lot of the dark energies due to both the depression and the anxiety that resulted from it. We moved into a 3-bedroom apartment on the second floor, and after 2 days of cleaning, painting, moving furniture, etc., we were ready to go. On our first night in the apartment, I was in the living room, and I was about to go down the hallway into the kitchen. The bedroom I shared with my sister was just off the kitchen. As I turned to walk away, I heard, "Kimberley," in the slowest, deepest voice I'd ever heard. It didn't sound completely human. and I didn't waste my time to look for whatever that was. Over the next 2 years, I had multiple experiences that I believe this entity was behind. My second experience, I have to quickly describe the setup of our room. You'd walk in, and to the right were our bunk beds. My little sister Anna had the bottom bunk, and I had the top, as she often got up first. To the left of the doorway was our dresser, which had on our small TV, a Wii console, and our other electronics. I should also mention that my sister slept with her feet towards the back wall of the bedroom, furthest from the doorway. One Sunday morning, I felt a kick in my back. I sat up and yelled at my sister, "Stop kicking me!" I lay down again, and once again, I was kicked in the back. This time, much swifter and much harder. Now frustrated, I sat up and prepared to yell at my sister. I began leaning over the bedside. "Anna, I said to stop!" I paused. My little sister Anna was fast asleep. In fact, she was snoring, with her mouth open slightly, and her feet were all the way at the end of the bed. There was no way she could have kicked me in the middle of my back. When that realization hit me, and before I knew it, I was up and headed into the living room. The next experience happened in my sophomore year of high school. I'd woken up around 2 a.m, but I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move my body. As I was wriggling around trying to move my body and open my eyes, I felt hands touching my leg, slowly moving up towards my thigh. I remember panicking and wanting to cry, but also not being able to believe this was actually happening to me. Finally, I was able to move, and when I did open my eyes, I saw a dark black mass above my bed. I was terrified and about to cry out when I heard a man's deep breathing and something run out of the room as the mass disappeared. I don't quite know what this other spirit or entity was, but it never harmed us. And my family and I had seen him or had experiences with him on multiple occasions. That until we moved away from him for good. So part of me kind of feels like he was more of a protective spirit. Fast forward to 2018, I'm now 20 and living with my mother and elder sister. My little sister had become pregnant with her first child, and she'd moved in with her boyfriend. This left me with my own room for the first time, but I was very sad. My little sister and I may have fought a bit, but she was my best friend. Previously, my sister had woken up at 3 a.m. crying because something was staring at her. And nothing scares her easily. But she was so convinced she turned on the light in the living room and begged me not to turn it off. At the time, I didn't believe her, but I was about to become the focus of whatever that thing was that scared her that night. When I moved into the room, I could feel like I was being stared at. Initially, I chalked it up to adjusting to having my own space. But at night, the staring would intensify. It would leave me feeling like someone or something was staring right through me until I fell asleep. It became uncomfortable enough to where my mother gave me a blessed rosary. My family is Catholic, and I would fall asleep holding onto that rosary as if my life depended on it. Eventually, my brother had a stupid idea one day to put salt in front of the entryway to the closet from where I felt it came. Yes, it sounds cliché because it's always a closet. But also, he put up a St. Michael candle. And within seconds, the candle was falling over. Feeling like I'd made a grave mistake, I moved the candle away. That night, I fell asleep holding my rosary once again. And when I woke up in my room, I could clearly see everything, as if I'd woken up. But some part of me knew I wasn't awake. I woke up without my rosary. I sat up in bed, and that's when I saw it. A tall, pale purple, skinny figure next to my bed. It had long, sharp nails and red eyes, and it was looking right at me. I looked around, planning my escape, but there was nowhere to run. Looking out, I saw my mother sleeping on the couch. This is why I thought I was awake. So I tried to scream, but nothing would come out. Slowly, it stretched one of its claws towards me. And at this point, I woke up, sweating and panting with fear. I immediately grabbed my sheet and pillow and joined my mother on the couch. Whatever it was wanted me to know that it was still there, and what it was capable of. I settled for leaving a blessed Bible in the closet, and whilst I still felt as if I was being watched, I never saw it again. I do wish I could say this was the last encounter I had with something evil. But moving forward to December 2019, I'd moved in with my now husband that February, and we were about to celebrate our first Christmas as a couple. We lived in one of the second-floor bedrooms of his parents' home. Our small, fake white Christmas tree stood in one corner behind the door. It was our little Charlie Brown tree, and a happy time for all of us. I'd experienced a couple of minor things in that home already. But this was nothing beyond hearing my own name and maybe feeling something touch or grab my shoulder in the basement. A few days before New Year's, my husband got a phone call. He'd enlisted in the Marines and had been asked if he wanted to ship out to boot camp earlier. And he agreed for the sake of not having to suffer through it with a bunch of high school graduates. Apparently, when you're in your mid-20s, being 18 makes you a baby again, even as a soldier. He'd accepted and then got a call back saying he'd no longer been needed to go, and that they'd found someone else. A couple of weeks later, he received another text. He could potentially get one of his top 3 jobs, but he would need to ship out after New Year's. I found this out when his family blurted it out before Christmas, and it led me to some experiences of the deepest depression I would go through in my life. I began hearing a whisper, and it would say things like, "I'm going to get you," and "Once he's gone, you're all mine." I would normally roll over and ignore this voice as best I could. One night, I'd not heard it much at all, and the silence was very welcome on my end, and I fell asleep soon after getting into bed. I woke up, still in my bed, but it was as if I was awake. I could see myself, my bedsheets, my husband, etc. But the Christmas tree was gone. That corner of the room was now dark. And in that darkness, 2 red eyes began to form where the tree once stood. Finally, a dark figure with the head of a bull stood there. It was on two legs and smirking at me. It began to turn to dark mist and come towards me. I tried to shake my husband awake, but the darkness consumed me. I woke up again, crying again in a sweat. My husband woke up hearing me cry and comforted me. Later, my mother-in-law would be working from home in my room. I told her about my experience, and she suggested it followed me from somewhere else, and that she personally hadn't seen anything. So I went out one morning and came back during her lunch. When I walked in that room, she turned around. "Honey, I need to tell you something," she said. She was very urgent. I looked at her, and she began explaining what had happened. She told me she was taking a quick cat nap between calls, and she looked up at some point between sleep and waking and saw it, the head of a bull, smirking at her. She gave me a blessed Mother Mary bracelet and told me to be safe, saying it would protect me. It was all the validation I needed. I do have more experiences, but these are some of the darkest ones, and this email's getting a bit long already. But I can share them if you're interested. I hope you've enjoyed my experience, and I wish you and your fellow listeners well. P.S. I lost my father last March, and this is my first year of everything without him. I know how you feel, and I'm so sorry for your loss, Kevin. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Regards, Kimberley. Well, thank you so much, Kimberley, for your wonderful minisode. The head of a bull stood on 2 feet. Now, for me, that's right out of almost Greek/Roman demonic literature. Something I really need to brush up in because ideally, although that sounds like a minotaur or a minotaur, however you wish to pronounce it, we know it's not that. But there's definitely something that is. I've read about it somewhere, I just can't place it right now, sadly. But also, the reason I kept in the personal message at the end is because I just wanted you all to know I've received a plethora of condolences regarding my father's recent passing, and I want you all to know I've received them all. I may not have replied to them all, simply because some days you can, some days you can't. But I just wanted to leave that in to show my appreciation to all of you guys for your support during this time. So sincerely, thank you. But again, Kimberley, what an amazing experience. You say you've encountered more and asked if we'd like to hear more. And I think I can confidently say on behalf of our listenership, yes, Kimberley, we would love to hear more of your experiences. And so that wraps up this edition of a Dark Minisode. I'll catch you all on Friday for our next installment of the Dark Paranormal. And don't forget, if you'd like to join the Patreon team, head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. And until then, stay safe and take care.